Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified. In the next 35 minutes, I'm going to take you through today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition, and we shall discuss the most important articles from today's paper for the civil service examination. The articles that we will take up for discussion has been tabulated on your screen and the time stamping for the same also has been provided. We'll begin with this news article on page number 7, A Policy with Many a Right Intention. The article is based on the New Education Policy 2020. The present education policy was formulated in 1986, and after 34 years, a new education policy has come up, the implementation of which will begin soon after getting approval from the Parliament. The New Education Policy 2020 is the most important news and the most important topic that you have to cover under the education section of GS paper 2. UPSC never to ask question on health and education. So you have to holistically cover the New Education Policy 2020 in every aspect. What the policy has to say about primary education, what it has to say about higher education, what it has to say about vocational education, research, what about foreign institutions opening their branches in India. All the aspect of education you must segregate and make short notes that can become your answer in the word limit in the mains exam. The New Education Policy is based upon the recommendation of Dr. K. Kasturi Rangan Committee. The committee gave many recommendations and some of the recommendation was reiteration of what has been recommended before. For instance, by Yashpal Committee, CNR Rao Committee, among others. The author in the article basically has discussed the innovative ideas in the new education policy and also points out some areas that have been missed or dropped by the education policy, which was originally recommended by the Kasturi Rangan Committee. Now let's see what the article has talked about. First and foremost, the policy has declared education as a public good. Public good is any commodity or service which is given to all in the society without the motive of profit. It can be given by government, it can be given by philanthropic institutions, it can also be given by individuals. The policy says that public education system is the foundation of a vibrant democratic society. The policy recognizes education as a public good, and this recognition of education as a public good entails policy implication. So the policy also has given some recommendation regarding planning, providing and financing the education in India. For instance, the policy aims to increase the public investment in education to 6% of GDP. Presently, it is about 3.1%. Since education has been recognized as a public good, that means it becomes an essential service to be provided without any profit motive. The policy promises to provide higher education free to about 50% of the students. The policy also aims at 100% gross enrollment ratio in school education by 2030 and 50% gross enrollment ratio in higher education by 2035. Since education is a public good, it has to be given to all. And for that reason, a very innovative idea of a special education zone has come up in the policy. Areas which are lagging behind in the educational parameters, and there are many citizens who need this public good, those areas will be declared as special education zone, and various schemes of the government, both central and state, will be coherently implemented in these special education zones. There is no doubt that future of a nation is built in classrooms. Education has contributed in building nations, and we have examples in front of our eye. USA provides public education. Education is provided as a public good. Even China has done pretty well. Not much ahead of India. The expenditure of China as percentage of GDP on education is 4%. It's not very high. USA, it's 5.5%. But rise of these nations have been dependent on the public infrastructure for education. Providing education as public good is no easy task, especially when expenditure on education is so low in India. So the policy asks for substantial investment in strong, vibrant and public education system. If you see the spending on education as percentage of GDP, Cuba is around 13%. Norway is also very high at 8%. Bhutan spends 6.6% of its GDP on education. South Africa 6.2%. Country like Iran is ahead of India, 4%. India is around 3.1%. This needs to be considerably increased. Without increased spending on education, it cannot be given as public good. The policy talks about holistic development in both academic and non-academic spheres. So obviously, the policy lays emphasis on extracurricular activities. The policy says that the three-language formula will be implemented. When the draft of the committee report was submitted in 2019, this issue became contentious, especially with southern states. And then it was assured that this will be not forced upon the state. Education is in the concurrent list. So the views of the states will also have to be taken into account. And again, it has been assured recently by the education minister that this formula, although is recommended in the policy, but will not be forced upon the states. The most innovative idea of all that has appeared in the policy is 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 system. This will replace the present 10 plus 2 system. In 10 plus 2 system, children below the age group of 5 years are not included in formal education. But in 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 system, children above the age of 3 years will be included in the formal education system. The first segment of the system will cover the children in the age group of 3 to 8. It is said that 85% of child's brain is developed by the age of 5 years. But ironically, up till this time, the child is not included in the formal education system. This new change will be a boon for the coming generation. There has been recommendation concerning early childhood care and education. This will include basically children from 3 to 5 years. And as mentioned before, universal education for the secondary level, 100% enrollment ratio. There's also a very important recommendation of breakfast in the school meal program. Presently, we have lunch through the midday meal scheme. And this new recommendation of adding breakfast in the school meal program recognizes the importance of nutrition and health for a better learning outcome. Also, this will also entail more spending on education, and it is not very clear presently the cost will be borne by the central government or the state government. But whosoever bears the cost, the idea is very good and must be implemented to improve the learning outcome from our schools. The new system will also have vocational education program beginning from the school level itself. Vocational education in India is very weak. Not even 1% of children have attended formal vocational education in India. This goes very high as 80% in countries like Kenya. This is greater than 60% in South Korea. This is around 50% in Malaysia. India has a problem of very high school dropout as well. And when students are dropped out of school, they have nowhere to go. In case of vocational education, skills are provided to students to get into useful, meaningful, productive employment. But in absence of formal vocational education system, there is no recourse. You are dropped out of school and you are completely unemployable. So this big lacuna in Indian schooling system has been fixed by the new education policy. It has been recognized for long now that in the initial years of schooling, child's learning is fast in home language or mother language or the local language or the regional language. Cognitive skills are developed better in the language known to the child. So the policy has recommended wherever possible the medium of instruction until at least grade 5 and preferably till grade 8 will be the home language, the mother tongue or the local or the regional language. You must also understand that parental guidance in these languages will also be better. The policy also has recommended a very innovative idea of combination of the subjects. The segregation of subjects into arts, commerce and science stream in high school will be done away with, and more creative combination of these subjects shall be offered. It is not very clear at this point in time as to how this will be done, but this will be groundbreaking. Presently, there is a psychological barrier that I'm from arts background or commerce background or science background. If I'm from science background, I cannot do well in history or geography. If I'm from arts background, then even elementary physics for me is damn difficult. But combination of subjects will actually break these psychological barriers and make a student more generally aware person, which is ultimately the aim of education. We have talked about vocational training. Formal vocational training is very, very low in India. If you see in the age group of 15 to 19, then only 12 students per thousand have taken formal vocational training. This is just 1.2%. There is another very, very innovative idea in the policy. The policy calls for a multidisciplinary higher education framework with the provision of portable credits. You can get into the college, but there will be multiple exit points. So you can just take the certificate in the subject and you can leave the college. You can take the diploma and you can leave the college, or you can complete the entire degree in it. But you will not be stuck in the college for 4 to 5 years. For some reason, maybe because you're not interested in the subject, maybe there are some impulsions on you to take up job or whatever it is. According to your convenience, you can get involved in the higher education system. This is groundbreaking, and this I would say is little ahead of its time as well. The new education policy is visionary. The policy also has recommended doing away with regular inspections of schools and institutions because that leads to corruption. Encouragement will be done for self-assessment and voluntary declaration. For example, all the flow of finances by the private institutions and schools will have to be voluntarily declared. The policy also has recommended many reforms in higher education. For instance, an integrated undergraduate, postgraduate, and research level education. If you do BTech, you have to take the GATE exam to do MTech, and then you have to apply again for PhD. The policy asks to do away with this, and right in the beginning, a student should be given the option to what extent he wants to get involved in the institution. Presently, there are multiple layers of regulatory bodies. There is Education Ministry, there is UGC, there are state universities, there are state government, and there are also regulators for technical parameters in the research institutions. For technical institutions, there is an additional regulatory body, AICTE. All these layers of regulation will be done away with, and there will be one regulatory body for entire sector called as Higher Education Commission of India. The policy has recommended National Assessment Center. This National Assessment Center will coordinate with various boards that are conducting the exams and will set the evaluation parameters for schools for better learning outcome. Presently, the foreign institutions are not allowed to open branches in India. Although they are allowed to do research cooperation with Indian institutions, but they cannot open their subsidiary bodies in India. The policy has called for selective entry of high quality foreign universities. The policy has called for strengthening of Central Advisory Board of Education. Presently, the role of Central Advisory Board of Education is limited to consultation. Whenever the central government plans to do something in the field of education, this body enables consultation with various stakeholders, various regulatory bodies, and state governments. But the policy has asked for a greater role for Central Advisory Board of Education for implementation of various provisions of the policy. There has to be a body to look after the implementation of the policy itself, right? So that role, the policy wants to be taken up by Central Advisory Board of Education. The policy also calls for establishment of a model multidisciplinary education and research university in every district. There is one very bold recommendation given by National Education Policy 2020, and that is abolition of affiliation system. Presently, the colleges are affiliated to central universities or the state universities, and they are given affiliation by UGC. But the new education policy wants all these regulations and affiliations to go away, and all the colleges giving degree will be declared as autonomous institutions free to give degree of their own. Presently, the degree comes from university. Individual colleges have no power to give out degrees. They in fact not even have power to formulate their own courses. They in fact not even have power to formulate their own lab experiments. Everything is regulated. But the policy says that all affiliated colleges must be developed into autonomous degree granting colleges by 2032 or merge completely with the universities they are affiliated to. So they will become the part of the university and not a body affiliated to the university. So this affiliation system will have to go if the government implements this. The argument is that since the regulation is so high presently, the focus is on compliance and there is very little innovation coming out from our colleges. For innovation, autonomy is a must. But of course, it has to be done gradually. That's why the year of implementation by the policy itself has been taken as 2032. That was about the innovative and the bold ideas recommended by the new education policy. The author also recognizes some of the areas that have been missed by the new education policy, which although was recommended by K. Kasturi Rangan committee. The committee recommendation said that all commercially oriented private institutions will be closed because education will be given as a public good. However, this has been toned down by the final new education policy. Now it says, the policy in the present form says that the matter of commercialization of education has been dealt with by policy through multiple relevant fronts, including light but tight regulatory approach that mandates full public self-disclosure of finances. So in all likelihood, the private institutions will be allowed to be run with a light but tight regulatory measures. In the given low tax to GDP ratio of India, it is less likely that public expenditure on education to the tune of 6% of GDP will happen. So the role of private institutions will always be there and it has been kept. But rightly so, it must be regulated. The direct expenditure on education in India is around 3.1% of GDP. But if you count it in a roundabout way, then expenditure towards education is around 10%. This calculation was done by the Economic Survey 2017-18. The draft policy submitted by the committee wanted this 10% to be increased to 20%. But the final policy is mute on this, only recommending 6% of GDP to be spent directly on education. Also, there is no mention of a state school education regulatory authorities. The light but tight regulation that the government is talking about, although there will be one regulator at the national level for higher education, but there has to be regulator for school education as well. Presently, there are none. At the state level, the Department of School Education is regarded as the apex regulator. The draft policy recommended for a school education regulatory authorities in the state, but the final policy has no provision for such a regulatory body. The final policy also has made no promise for full recruitment of teachers. The role of teachers, especially in the primary and lower secondary education, is quintessential. Teachers must give clear instruction to the students because at the early stage, instruction from the teachers are crucial for higher learning outcome. So teachers training, right bend of mind of the teacher, motivation of the teacher, all these things are very important, and for that reason, full recruitment rather than part-time teachers is very important. This was recommended in the draft body, but the final policy has no such recommendation. So in the mains answer, these points can become your recommendation to further improve upon the new education policy. You have to make a star mark on the new education policy 2020. Question directly or indirectly will come in the coming mains exam on this. This article is from page number 11. It has been titled Keep the Focus on Education. This will give you a good idea from which you can make a small case study for mains examination for the 15 marker. Kerala government has formed a committee headed by MP Punya. He is not member of parliament. MP Punya is his name. He is vice chairman of All India Council for Technical Education, AICTE. The committee will study the feasibility of setting an education city in the state of Kerala. This is not a new idea. The idea was floated few years back by parties presently in opposition in the state of Kerala. But if materialized, Kerala will get a first education city in India. We have city called as Steel City. We have city famous for textile. We have city famous for manufacturing. We have city famous for various GIs. But we don't have a city which is famous for education. We have a city called as Kota, but that is for coaching. That is not famous for formal education. Or some part of Delhi is famous for UPSC coaching, but we don't have a city which is famous for formal education. And in the backdrop of New Education Policy 2020, which has declared education as a public good, such a concept must gain traction. The article has said that Kerala is well suited for such a concept. Kerala is best positioned to come up with an education hub. Because as per the Annual Status of Education Report 2018, Kerala is doing really well when it comes to education. It is only the state of Kerala and Assam that has pre-primary classes even in the government schools. Kerala stands first in terms of students studying in class 3 and can at least do subtraction. In Kerala, the enrollment in higher secondary education is higher in government schools as compared to private schools. In government schools, it's 58.5%. In private school, it's just 34.3%. But Kerala has not done very well in higher education. Because of lesser job prospect in the state after higher secondary education, most of the students, as high as 50%, migrate out of the state. So coming up with an education hub, an education city, is also a requirement of the state of Kerala. The article says that time has now come that education city must come up in different states of India, and ground has been laid for this. There has been favorable national policy environment in this regard. For instance, the new education policy addresses the legal hurdle in India regarding the operation of foreign universities. The policy has recommended for a new legislative framework for the operation of top foreign universities, as we saw in the previous article. Presently, the foreign universities cannot open branches in India. But as per the policy recommendation, sooner the government may come up with a legislation to facilitate this for top foreign universities. Also, the growth of foreign direct investment in Indian education sector has increased. And in the last budget, Finance Minister encouraged external commercial borrowing and foreign direct investment in the education sector for financing infrastructure. But you must know that Government of India has already permitted 100% FDI in the education sector under automatic route for approval. But there are other hurdles for this. For example, the profit that the foreign institutions earn after opening the institution in India, they cannot be taken back to the native country. If those things are relaxed, then perhaps 100% FDI will have more meaning. Education hubs, although has not gained traction, but there has been considerable success in this regard already. For example, Rajiv Gandhi Education City in Sonipat and the Knowledge Corridor in Gandhinagar has set some example in the country. Many states are doing numerous collaboration with foreign institutions. Even the state of Kerala, under the Startup Mission, the government of Kerala has recently established Fab Labs. Fab here is for fabrication. These fabrication labs are technical prototyping platforms. These Fab Labs have been set up in association with the Center for Bits and Atoms of MIT. The state government of Kerala also has established the Institute of Advanced Virology in Thiruvananthapuram with the support of Global Virus Network, which is an international coalition for medical virologists based in Baltimore in United States. So Indian states are already engaged extensively with foreign institutions. So attracting them and persuading them to open branches in India will not be very difficult if the legal hurdles are taken care of. And now since the new education policy has called for it, so establishment of education city becomes much more easy. As we have talked about that Kerala is facing unique challenge in developing human resources over the past few decades. Although it has done remarkably well in public schools, the higher education institutions are ill-equipped. The private professional colleges in the state have been running with less than 50% of intake capacity because students are migrating out of the state and there is also a meager employment opportunity in the state. So education city will actually take care of the quality of higher institutions, but that has to be complemented with high skill, high-tech employment opportunities in the state. The article gives certain suggestions as to how such a hub can come up, And what can be done for that? First of all, the article says that globally the trend is that such education cities, for example, the education city of Qatar or the Dubai International Academic City, they run on neoliberal market model. But however, the new education policy 2020 has declared education as a public good. And public good is one which is given without the motive of profit. So we cannot follow this new liberal market model in India. So the state's involvement is of utmost importance at all the stages, right from identifying a suitable location to addressing the challenges related to equity and equality in education. Secondly, apart from foreign institutions, Indian institutions with reputation, for example, the institutes of eminence, they must find position in such educational hub. The state of Kerala has huge diaspora. This large diaspora and institutions connected with the state in some way, for example, researchers with state body as we have just discussed, they all must be roped in. And such a large project cannot come up only with public expenditure. Even the philanthropist who does not consider education as commodity must be roped in. As we have discussed in the previous article that although education has been declared as public good in the new education policy, but still the private institutions have not been kept at bay. There will be light but tight regulatory mechanism for private institutions. Their participation is quintessential. The low tax to GDP ratio of India does not provide much elbow room for government to increase the spending on education to 6%. That is why many, including the former ambassador and Higher Education Council Vice President T.P. Srinivasan, is of the opinion that private universities must be allowed to function in such educational hub. So it has to be a joint public-private effort, but it has to be done because education is the backbone of any progressive society. We have seen magical economies like Singapore, like South Korea, like Japan, and more recently like Malaysia. In all these countries, the success story has been driven by education, by vocational training, by skill development, by public expenditure on education, by higher enrollment ratio. Without this, the fortune of a nation cannot be turned around. By 2030, India is said to have largest working population in the world. The youth does not need just literacy. We need jobs, we need life skills. We must ensure that India become a preferred destination for higher education. And for that, Education City will be the biggest attraction. This article is from page number 7. The title is Parents, the First and Natural Tutors. The article has been written in the backdrop of certain provisions of national education policy which emphatically make the case for early childhood care and education. Over 85% of a child's cumulative brain develops before the age of 6 years, and yet over 5 crore children are estimated to not have attained foundational literacy and numeracy in India. Also, we discussed in the first article that national education policy has recommended that instruction until at least grade 5 and preferably till grade 8 must be given in the home language or the mother tongue or the local and the regional language. In this context, the role of parents increased many folds because education in the early years that can be either reinforced or undone at home. And if the education is provided in the mother tongue or the local and the regional language, then the guidance provided by the parents will be higher. See, the point is, children who are from socio-economically disadvantaged background, they are the one who will gain the most from early childhood care and education. But ironically, they are the one who are not sent for early childhood care and education centers. The National Education Policy also has laid out a detailed paradigm for educators to provide high quality early childhood care and education through preschools and Anganwadi centers. It also has talked about how parents can become active stakeholders in their children's education because parents are children's first and natural tutors. Home is the first school for children. Involving parents is necessary to ensure that children learn the foundational skills needed to succeed in school. So how parents can be involved in preschooling becomes an important area that you have to prepare regarding national education policy. The article addresses the question how can low-income parents with constraint on their time and energy start getting more involved in early childhood care and education? The article gives answer in form of aim. The article says 3 areas can be used to increase low-income parents' involvement in early education of children. That is aspiration, information, and motivation and measurement. The article acknowledges that low-income parents do value education from primary school onwards, and they spend disproportionate amount of their income on schooling of their children. However, awareness of the importance of education at preschool is missing. Article says that 30% of low-income parents do not send their children to any kind of preschooling. Instead, what they do, they start schooling of their children at very early stage. So in early years, maybe 3 years or 3.5 years or 4 years, they send their children to class 1, where cognitive and emotional preparedness of children is not there. But still the parents give a big jump to the children with the motivation of saving some money and speeding up the process of schooling. But unfortunately, these are the children who are left behind in primary schools and as they move to middle schools. And they are left behind to the extent that there can be no recovery. They become poor students in their school and they are the one who drop out of school. So this awareness has to be there in low-income parents that preschooling is important. Secondly, while high-income parents face huge amount of social pressure, they have the pressure of achieving the developmental milestone for their children. They have to prepare basic rhymes, basic arithmetics, and basic information like colors, name of the flower, prime ministers, animals, that children must be knowing by the age of 6. Because if in a gathering the child fails to perform, then the embarrassment comes to the parents. But no such social incentive is there in case of low-income parents. So the aspiration has to be set high through role modeling, persuasion, mass media, involvement of celebrities and other local influencers. So step number 1 is setting aspiration for low-income parents as well. Step number 2 is providing information to the parents. Once awareness and aspiration has been built up, we must provide low-income parents with educational tools to support their children that they can themselves confidently administer. Parents must be able to administer the learning of children because in early years, the attention span is only of 5 to 15 minutes. So instruction and guidance must come from parents. The article says that all parents are usually equipped to understand the foundational skills that the children are learning. Because now around 70% of mothers and even more percentage of fathers are educated up to class 5. So we need to arrange for the vast wealth of printed and online content that we have in simplified and contextualized manner, using the local languages. If proper materials are made available to parents, then guidance coming from parents will also be high. Then the article says as the third step, there should be measuring of progress. Behavioral research on nudges, social incentives, and power of creating habits has demonstrated that measurement acts as a powerful motivation mechanism. For example, the test that you give, the marks and the feedback that come along with it, that is measurement of your progress. And it's a big motivation factor for you to study and work even harder. Such measurement mechanism must be developed for child's learning even at the early stage. And sharing result with parents and developing plan in partnership with parents can ensure that truly no child is left behind. This article is from page number 6. It has been titled Rebuild India's Confidence, Revive the Economy. This article has been co-authored by India's former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. The article is based on present economic slowdown caused by COVID-19 pandemic, and the article gives some measures to counter the slowdown. But there is nothing new in the article. All the aspect that has been touched upon has been covered in greater detail in the previous DNS. We have discussed the possible measures to counter economic slowdown in the DNS dated 5th of May 2020. We also have discussed multiple times the monetary policy taken up by RBI to counter the economic slowdown. For instance, we did one on 23rd of May. Recently, the RBI governor has highlighted that Indian economy may contract for the first time in last 41 years. Last time Indian economy contracted was in 1979-80. Then the economy contracted by 5.2%. It is difficult to estimate at this point in time that by what percentage the Indian economy will contract, but consensus of economics is on the point that it will surely contract. And the contraction will be on account of both the demand and the supply side contraction. This is termed as the twin shock that the Indian economy is facing. The twin shock is because of decline in investment and consumption expenditure. Households are curbing expenditure due to less certainty of future. They are not sure of their employment status in the coming times. So the expenditure has decreased, and that has decreased the profit margins of industry and resulted in loss of jobs. The poor health of industries has caused increase in the number of NPAs and poor financial position of banks and NBFCs. Now the banks and NBFCs are reluctant to give loan, and the private sector is also fearful of low returns and hence refraining itself from undertaking any new investment. Decreased lending from the bank has critically affected the real estate and the manufacturing sector. The article has looked at the problem from the point of view of confidence. The focus is on behavioral economics. If you remember, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister, he used to talk about confidence in the market. He used to always talk about confidence of the market, animal spirit, market sentiment, and same has been talked about in the article as well. The problem is that individuals and households don't have confidence, so they are not spending. This needs to be taken care of. Similarly, the banks, they do not have confidence in the market. They are not sure of their return because insolvency process has been stalled by the government. So market economics needs to play out on its own, and that will bring confidence in the banking industries. So what do we need to do? The article has following prescription. First of all, there must be cash transfers. The article says that no doubt Manrega has acted as savior for poor people during the pandemic. The issue around Manrega has been dealt in detail in the DNS dated 7th of July 2020. Acknowledging the importance of Manrega, the article says that there is need to go beyond guaranteed employment and we must go towards guaranteed income. There is need to provide for meaningful cash transfers to enable the families to deal with the stress during the COVID-19 pandemic. The article says that there are fear from some quarters that such cash transfer will discourage people to return back to work and will hamper the availability of workforce for the industries. However, the article disputes that such fears are unfounded and the government need not be worried about cash transfer programs because countries like USA has done it and there has been no problem in restarting the economy. The article says that RBI and Government of India has taken various measures such as cutting down the policy rates, improving liquidity in the economy, credit guarantees on the loans, but this is not enough. There has to be confidence in the market. And for that, market economy should be allowed to function. And for that, insolvency process must be allowed to be carried out. Presently, Government of India has stalled the insolvency process. And this has decreased the confidence of the lending institutions. Apart from this, long pending governance reforms in the public sector banks must be carried out. The article says that Government of India must take benefits from the international institutions such as World Bank, IMF and other institutions. Not mentioned in the article, but India is in the process of taking loan from AIIB as well. But the article acknowledges that there could be only limited help coming from the international institutions because every country need help at this point in time. So, naturally, all the suggestions will come down to this. Direct monetization has been dealt in detail in the DNS dated 27th June. This is also a very critically important question for the coming mains examination. Should direct demonetization be a way out for financing the measures taken by Government of India to deal with COVID-19 pandemic? That's all what the article has to offer, but it has given you again the dimension that you have to think upon and for which you should have your short notes ready for the coming mains exam. With this, we have come to the end of the discussion. Now we will do question for the day. Yesterday's question was, seaweed contain which of the following? Amino acid, vitamin A, zinc, sodium, calcium, and magnesium, antioxidants. Seaweed is a superfood. It is nutritionally very rich. The answer is all 1, 2, 3, and 4. The question for today is recently, which of the following state has proposed a education city? Gujarat, Karnataka, Kerala, or Haryana? We have come to the end of the session. Thank you very much for hearing me out. Do not forget to attempt the DNS quiz. Goodbye, take care.